Every now and then, a game comes around that is universally loved. One that is heralded as a genre-defining experience that will set the groundwork for all future games to come. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild isn't quite one of them. Certainly there are aspects of the game that fit that description. Being able to climb up any surface still blows my mind. And the physics engine alone makes this game well deserving of the perfect scores it has received. But looking past that, there are fundamental issues scattered throughout Hyrule that hold the game back. Some are simply areas with plenty of room for improvement, while others actively damage the experience. It's definitely a phenomenal game that deserves the praise it gets, but it's not the new gold standard for open world games, or for the Zelda series. But a sequel? A sequel could be. I want to remind everyone that just because I'm highlighting the flaws of Breath of the Wild does not mean I think it's a bad game. Looking at what's wrong with, well, anything is the best way to learn how to improve in the future. And there's nothing in this game that this applies more to than the combat. What? That's ridiculous, right? Finding all the creative ways to kill Ganon's minions is one of the best parts of this game. How could that be better? Simple. Make it so it's not as boring. The sheer number of ways you can kill smaller enemies is staggering, yes. But once you start to deal with stronger enemies, the game becomes monotonous to the point that I avoided most encounters. It's a strange difficulty curve, where everything starts out extremely dangerous, but becomes a joke the further you go. Everything shares the same basic strategy of dodge, flurry slash, repeat to win. Once you learn how to time these dodges properly, you can defeat anything in the game. And there aren't many kinds of enemies to defeat. Now, open world games aren't known for having particularly complex combat systems. Skyrim is incredibly simple, yet people sing its praises to this day. But this is Zelda, a series full of enemies that you have to use different strategies to defeat. Get around defenses, exploiting weak points, utilize a crazy arsenal of items. These single-minded paths of least resistance pale in comparison. So, here's what we need to do to fix that. First off, we need to look at how enemies drop weapons. Due to the fact that every blacksmith in Hyrule makes swords out of plastic, you constantly need to replenish your arsenal. Which means that most of the enemies you fight need to drop something that you yourself can use. You'll notice that a good 80% of the monsters you see are variants of Moblins, Bokoblins, and Lizalfos. This is why. Those are the monsters that use weapons themselves. And when 80% of the monsters you fight all attack you in the exact same ways, I'm sure you see the problem. There are a few ways we could tackle this, but one of the easier ones is to simply lower the bar of what we consider to be a weapon. A Tektite's mandibles could easily work as a dagger if needed. Gathering gel from a choo-choo could act as a form of elemental grenade. Grab a stick and a bunch of keys talons, glue them together, and you've got yourself a serviceable club. And an enemy doesn't have to be using a weapon to be able to drop one. Maybe a Dodongo swallowed the hammer a Goron threw at it. The blade of an unfortunate adventurer is still lodged in the Gibdo that killed him. You could have entities like Fi that turn into a weapon when you defeat them. That'd allow you to design whatever kind of battle you want. This is a good first step that allows for greater enemy variety, but it doesn't fix this. This is not okay. It's not good to have a single strategy that beats everything. That leads to monotony, and monotony leads to boredom, and boredom, as we all know, leads to playing something else. To counter this problem, this overlay should look more like this. Flurry strikes are very cool, but they're broken. So we're removing them. In their place, dodging an enemy attack gives you the opportunity to perform several maneuvers, kind of like the special moves in Twilight Princess. This would allow for more creative enemies, where you have to use these maneuvers to beat them. Which might take away from the open-ended nature of the game, but when it comes to stronger enemies, a combat system this simplistic just doesn't work with that design philosophy. High-level combat wasn't the only thing the philosophy didn't mesh with. Tell me, What would you consider to be the theme of the Zelda series? For me, it has always been the growth of a hero. You always start as a small, helpless child, slowly accumulating weapons and abilities to become the hero of Hyrule. It's a great theme, one of the best parts of the series, something I'll replay these games again and again to experience. And something I did not find here. Why is that a problem? Because it botched up the game's progression. Being able to go anywhere at any time, being fully capable of taking on any challenge the moment you leave the Great Plateau, it meant that there was nothing to work up to. Well, there was always one thing, but with enough skill, that could be your first objective. This wasn't a problem for me until I reached the end of the game, and thought about replaying again. With other Zeldas, I've always had memories I'd want to re-experience, story moments, or cool dungeons I wanted to replay. But here, I can't think of anything I'd want to go back to. And really, there's not much to go back to. All the joy I felt in this game was from discovery, of finding cool places, strategies, neat interactions with the environment, and seeing what I could do with them. But now that I know all that stuff, and if a sequel was made, I'd just play the better game. Most people blame this on the story, how there's just not enough of it to get invested in. Every interaction in the game boils down to, oh hey, here's a character. Do a thing. You did it. Repeat. Which, yes, is a problem. The entire story is just a Ganon slaying training montage. But the source of that problem is actually the open world. There's no structure to this game. No noticeable milestones, obstacles, or power spikes. Nothing that makes you feel like you've accomplished something. Even getting the Master Sword, a monumental moment in every other game of the series, doesn't feel all that special. We went from earning the sacred heirlooms of multiple species, to unlocking the way to control lycanthropy, to solving a bunch of physics puzzles. They're fun physics puzzles, but come on. I'll admit, this is probably more of a personal complaint, based on how I like to play video games. It's perfectly alright if you don't agree with me, I'm not saying you have to. I just don't see why we both can't be happy. Enter Rivali's Gale, the one moment in this game's progression that I really felt like I'd gotten something meaningful. All of the sudden, Hyrule opened up to me. So many more avenues of exploration were available. This is the kind of progression that really benefits from an open world like this. New tools that allow you to better interact with the world around you. So that is what we're going to do. But before we can use those tools, we need ways to earn them. And classic Zelda dungeons are the best way to do that. Memorable labyrinths of puzzles and enemies tied around a specific item with a boss at the end that gives a story-related reward. What's that reward? I don't know. Collect X number of pieces of the MacGuffin that will save the world. Who cares? The important thing we need to do is design dungeons and bosses around items that don't limit the open world. We can't have any of these, or that, or anything like this. So here are some possible ideas. An underground network of caverns, filled with all sorts of nasty traps, hides one of the treasures we seek. The only way to get through safely is to combine the strategic activation of switches with the super speed of the Pegasus boots. Above the clouds is a different dungeon, much like the city in the sky of Twilight Princess. Perhaps the forgotten ruins of that city. Broken bits of floating islands that you must use hookshots to Spider-Man your way around as you hunt down an airborne menace. Other ideas could be the Ocarina of Time, or some equivalent, with a dungeon based around controlling the wind and weather. Some kind of camouflage item that you use to sneak through a dangerous fortress. Maybe even a way to temporarily fly. Overall, I just want reasons to replay the game, to experience that satisfaction of looking back and seeing how much I've grown. This doesn't do it for me. On the subject of replay value, the next Zelda game desperately needs better stories. I'm not talking about the main narrative. Breath of the Wild wasn't great, but that's more of a problem with the genre as a whole. No, I'm talking about side quests. The extra subplots that, free from the influence of the main story, allow for all kinds of interesting events. Most games of this genre stuff their worlds with side quests, hundreds of hours of them. But Breath of the Wild has fetch quests. And that's it. This is the main reason why I don't consider Breath of the Wild to quite be a genre-defining game. We have a vast overworld featuring 5 unique sentient races, and gathering 50 rush rooms is the best thing that could be done with them? Thanks, but no. The game feels incomplete without the mountain of side quests similar games have, like a tech demo, a proof of concept of what the actual genre-defining game will be. Now, I'm not expecting Skyrim levels of side quests, although that would be amazing. For a Breath of the Wild sequel, something comparable to Majora's Mask would satisfy me. Let me bring star-crossed lovers together, lift curses from the downtrodden, defend cows from alien invasion, bring in gratitude crystals, masks to collect, skulltulas to find. The rewards can be meaningless as long as there's some form of narrative to go alongside them. Imagine if Korok seeds came with a cute little story where you help the Koroks with a problem, instead of solving mindless puzzles. If every monk told you some of Hyrule's history, I would have scoured the land for every single one. You might have to cut down the number of Korok seeds in that case, but I think I speak for everyone when I say that's preferable. So, combat, progression, and side quests. Those are the major features I want to see improved in the next Zelda game. The things I'll be scouring trailers for when it is eventually announced. I have a few other improvements I'd like to make, but due to their smaller scale and importance, we're just gonna rattle through them real quick. Breath of the Wild was Zelda's first foray into voice acting. And much like anybody's first time with anything, it was... an attempt? I've certainly seen worse, but that's not saying much. Disjointed dialogue, out-of-place accents, miscast roles, and lip sync that might as well not even be there. Next time, we need to either fix those issues or just add an option to turn the voice acting off. I'd argue there's charm in the weird grunts, gasps, and laughs of the past, wouldn't you? Shrines are an enjoyable way of earning heart containers. As long as they don't get in the way of proper dungeons, I'd happily bring them back in a sequel. But this design needs to go. No more Sheikah markings, and I never want to see this shade of blue again. I don't like this mechanic. It takes all the fun out of finding stronger weapons. I'd remove it in a heartbeat if the game didn't revolve around it. So instead, to compensate this irritating drawback, a way to repair weapons should exist in some form, and each weapon type needs to have a Master Sword equivalent. Something powerful that never breaks, that you have to do something to earn. That's what the champion weapons should have been. Please, I've wanted this for so long. I feel like Zelda would be my favorite video game heroine if she just had a chance at the spotlight. How would the embodiment of wisdom play? Would she be stealthy? Exploit weaknesses? Try diplomacy? I don't know, but I want to find out. This is a weird one. Breath of the Wild has some of the most intelligent music I've heard. Listen to this. You can almost hear the piano galloping alongside you. Despite that, very few themes are as memorable as, say, Gerudo Valley or the Great Sea. I just like the music to have more prevalence is all. Don't have pointless restrictions like this in any game. The only thing they add to the experience is disappointment. We've talked about a lot of topics today, but if there is only one thing that you can take away from this video, one thing that needs to be changed about Breath of the Wild, it is this. Dogs deserve to be pets. I don't care if it's a pointless interaction to program, this is a matter of principle.